Thank you for coming back to Mastering Counseling. We're so happy to have our listeners on here again for a great time of exploration. Today, I am really excited to have Gordon Smith, who is the founder of Gifted and Growing. And I think we're going to focus on a lot of things that we haven't talked about before. Welcome to the show, Gordon.
Thanks.
We When looking at your website and things, looks like you have counseling, coaching, and that you use a lot of improv for all kind of ages. And so we haven't gotten to talk about using improvisation as a great therapy tool. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. Why don't we go ahead and just start off? You've been in this for about 2 decades. And so why don't you take us back to the beginning and how you started on this path?
In the beginning, I was the member of a dysfunctional family. I came to mental health early. In high school, I wanted to be a psychologist. Got to college, hit organic chemistry, and was like, "Oh hell no, I'm not trying to do all that." And meandered for a while and came back to it and went to grad school in '99 to get my master's in community counseling at Western Carolina University. Um, and then kind of went what looks like a fairly conventional route. I was housed in an agency for a while, bounced to a couple different agencies, got an office as a clinician after doing some in-home intensive family stuff and a lot of like cut your teeth young therapist work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then in 2008, the agency I was with folded, and all of the clinicians and psychiatrists decided to go out on our own into private practice and kind of formed a cooperative model. So
Okay.
that's kind of how I ended up in private practice.
Okay. So you said it kind of the agency split off, but then you went on your own. But did you say like a group of you stayed together to create your own?
That's right. The agency
Okay.
folded. And
Right.
so we were all people without a home at that point. So we formed this cooperative business model where we all had our own individual practices, but then we shared marketing and
Right.
space.
Okay. Very cool. And then is that who you are still with today with Gifted and
Oh,
Growing? No.
no,
Okay.
no. That was, gosh, so many iterations ago.
Okay.
I've been doing this for 23 years now and have went into private practice in '08, went into solo private practice in 2012, and
Okay.
then formed Gifted and Growing in 2017.
Okay. All right. So about 6 to 7 years. Very cool. Um, so there's a lot of G words that I don't know. I always love when gifted, growing. Um, and your name is Gordon, so maybe that's why. But what talk to us a little bit about how you ended up focusing on people who find themselves thinking differently than a lot of the population and what struggles comes with being gifted.
Yeah. So in late 2016, I was doing kind of a whole life review. I at the time had a full private practice as a generalist on every insurance panel under the sun. I was also an elected official on the Asheville City Council, and so I had that kind of full-time job in
Mm,
addition to my practice. And I was coming to the end of my second term and trying to figure out what I wanted to do going forward. And a review of my practice was a part of that process.
mm-hmm,
And I used to keep paper calendars.
mm-hmm.
Remember those? Remember the paper
I
ones?
still use one at my school. I can't help it.
Well, I've gotten away from it now. It took a minute though, but I took 7 years of those and just started reading through all those names and
Mm,
thinking about all those people that I'd spent time with and pulled out the names of the people that I felt like I'd done my very best work with. And
mm,
then I asked myself what they had in common. And this was it, that they were all very bright and complex and intense. And I asked myself, I wonder if there's any literature about this, and
mm-hmm,
went down the rabbit hole and pretty soon remembered that, oh, yeah, I'm a grown-up gifted kid too. And there is a wealth and a growing wealth of literature about giftedness, neurodivergence,
Hmm.
therapeutic approaches, as well as educational and more holistic approaches,
Hmm.
including coaching and other modalities. And so I dove in. This was the area that I feel best in, and the people that
Hmm.
I've been able to help the most. And so I just made it my whole practice.
That you going through all of those, I love that so much. And then like I don't think along the way you were thinking I'm tracking all this data on what type of people. You were just keeping your schedule, and then to see what came of it. I think that's like an awesome thing to do. I always feel, go ahead.
Well, I was just, I think that a lot of the conventional wisdom in private practice land right now is to niche, is to like find a specialized population and really focus there. And young clinicians are asked to do this before they even know what they're good at or what they like. And so there's
Hmm.
a lot of guesswork. And I can't imagine that that happens without stepping into a lot of potholes and bear traps along the way.
Yeah.
Um, or trying to like read the tea leaves on like where the public need is. It
Hmm.
all seems very guesswork
Yeah.
versus just get out there and do some work and find out.
Right. Um, Now this is a little more personal, but when you say grown up and gifted, did you feel like you didn't understand that until more into adulthood, or did you know that when you were younger? Are
Yeah,
you okay sharing?
I was
Okay.
identified in third grade, like so many people are, with some teachers said, "Hey, you should test this kid," and so I got tested, and I was actually placed in a school for the gifted down in Florida called Pineview,
Okay.
and went there for my fourth grade year, and I took four different languages, and when I was in fourth grade, and then you were supposed to choose one at the end of your fourth grade year, and then you would do it for the next 7 years. So you'd be fluent by the time you got out. But my dad got a job in another town, and so I got pulled out of that school, and I got put back into the general population, public school. I had my once a week pull out for gifted or whatever. I
Oh,
forgot all about it for the most part.
okay.
But I was definitely a gifted student. And the way that showed up for me wasn't straight A's, far from it. It was a recognition that I wasn't really interested in what they were trying to teach me, and I wasn't really interested in what they were selling. And so I very studiously got B minuses and C pluses, so I didn't raise expectations and still met enough of the minimum requirements that I was going to be able to get a GPA to get me into a school that was good enough for
Hmm.
college. I like I like formed a fake club so I could get out of class. And then what I did with my time when I was skipping class was to go find an empty classroom and read the books I was interested in. Um, so it was like full on like the nerdiest subversion of the school system I've ever heard. And so you see gifted kids who are those high achievers. You also see those gifted kids who are really not seen, who end up failing out or just like jumping into drug use. Um,
Hmm.
so the gifted profile can look a lot of different ways. When I rediscovered it and began to look at my own life through this lens, what I saw was what I see in a lot of my clients, which
Hmm.
was a pervasive sense of not feeling seen, a recognition that I had been masking a lot of parts of myself for a lot of years
Hmm.
in order to establish connection with others, to
Hmm.
establish acceptance in neurotypical situations. And so many of my clients have been doing this masking their whole lives. If
Hmm.
we talk about giftedness as a type of neurodivergence, in that
Right.
it's so far out of the norm, we're at the third standard deviation and beyond. So this is, depending on which numbers you use, about 2.1% of the population.
Hmm.
And once you get into the highly gifted, it's about 0.1% of the population. And
Wow.
so these are folks who are outliers by nature and living divergently from the kind of neuromajority. And as we get into that type of divergence, you find the other divergences as well. You find characteristics of what they call ADHD, characteristics of what is known as autism, characteristics of dyslexia, dyscalculia, synesthesia. All these neurodivergences tend to start showing up because we are really outside of the rule book once you're out here on the skinny end of the bell curve,
Mm-hmm.
because the diagnostic manuals, the therapeutic techniques, we're all normed on the 95% of the people within two standard deviations of the norm. As makes sense. If you're building broad systems, you want them to apply broadly. But then trying to apply those systems to people who are outliers is where the trouble really begins.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's an educational norm or a mental health norm or a diagnostic norm, it just looks really different out here on the fringes. And
Yeah.
so I certainly had that experience in my life. And so many of the clients who come to see me are people who have been misdiagnosed or have had their diagnoses missed altogether because they're so good at masking,
Mm.
that they haven't been identified as autistic or ADHD or some of these other learning differences. And what I would say is like the number one affliction of gifted people is loneliness.
Mm.
That finding people to connect with in meaningful ways and to have the depth of connection that we need as people is simply harder.
Mm. Wow, that is so interesting. And the stats you gave, those were good. I don't know if I would have guessed, those numbers. What was the one you said for gifted? And I know you said highly gifted, 0.1, 2.2, I think.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
depending on the numbers, between 2.2 and 3.1, depending on which numbers you're using. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, very fascinating. Um, and I would encourage you, our last episode, the whole focus, it was kind of more of a general, the counselor worked with neurodivergent people and more in a not on the gifted end, but in just various paths. But yeah, we've definitely talked about that before. Let's talk about so how you use improv. I saw on your website it can be families, it can be, I think, groups of teenagers, it can be therapists. Um, yeah, I can't wait to hear about this as a former drama
Yeah.
teacher, which
Yeah,
you're
which is,
probably like, don't even relate the two. It's not the same.
well, improv grew out of improvisational theater. It was actually what we call improv today was created in Chicago
Hmm.
um, by a woman named Viola Spolin, who was a drama teacher.
Okay.
Uh, and she also ran a place called Hull House, which was a halfway house for immigrants coming to this country. And so under this roof were people from all these different nationalities. This is back in the 1930s.
I do
Um,
know about Hull House. That's so funny, but I didn't realize it was connected to,
Viola
yeah.
Spolin was not only a drama teacher, she was a social worker.
Okay. Yeah, she was in the
So
history book I used to teach out of.
fantastic. So you know about some of these foundations already. Uh,
Yes.
she was looking for a way to connect people rapidly and to help them build skills and confidence. And she started using these theatrical games. And this developed into these improvisational games. And she started writing about it. Fast
Hmm.
forward a generation, and her son is founding Second City Improv in Chicago.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So born of theater, born of social work.
Yeah.
So it is the crossroads where these two roads meet. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm primarily a therapist, like I said, and I've done some coaching work. And in the pandemic, I was looking for ways during lockdown, ways to establish intimacy more rapidly in online spaces. And so I started attending all these different experimental groups. I don't know if you did any of this, but there was some super weird, fun, interesting, quirky stuff going on in March and April of 2020 on the internet.
Yes.
Um, so everyone's trying to norm and adapt, and I stumbled into a Second City improv class. And within 5 minutes, people who had never met each other were being super goofy and really vulnerable in that way.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'd never seen anything like it.
Wow.
And so I was like, I'm going to keep doing this. There's something juicy happening here. And after the fourth session of that improv, the facilitator let me know that there was an improv for therapists class that she was running. And it started the next day. And so I got into that. And then I took level two of that and then advanced again. And then they invited me to be on the board of the company, which is called Improv Therapy Group.
Okay.
And they're wonderful for anyone who's looking for something. They run improv groups not only for therapists, but for clergy, for emergency service workers, for all these affinity groups to be able who can
Mm-hmm.
utilize these skills and just, cut up and just like have some fun.
Right.
So, yeah, fast forward a little bit, and I'm teaching and then bringing the improv classes under my own umbrella because what I was seeing as I formed these improv for gifted adult groups was people who had never been in a room of self-identified gifted people where that was just allowed to be true,
Mm-hmm.
where you were going to be accepted and respected, and whatever you brought was gonna be yes-anded, which is a central tenet of improv.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're going to accept what you're bringing, and we're going to build on it.
Okay.
And this is a new experience for so many gifted people to be in this room where they're not told that they're too much or to tone it down or that they're going too fast or that they're being confusing or too complex, but to
Mm.
actually be in a space where they can take the governor off of the engine, take the editor out of the room, and just really explore and experience what it's like to feel socially safe
Mm.
and to just let their brains do what they're built to do.
Right. Wow, I love that. And wow, the history of it, starting, I think we have Second City in Detroit as well.
Hmm.
Um, I had a friend way long ago, middle school, who made it there and has been on a couple movies. But yeah, that's amazing. The combination of bringing all of those immigrants together and then her son taking it farther, and then where you're at with it. So just kind of walk us through. This is typically online, I'm thinking, where like you, if you were the I don't know if I say coach or teacher of it, everyone meets and then you provide them some kind of general, this is our setting, and then they roll with it and just work off of each other.
Well, it's a process. So, like I said, for a lot of folks, this is their first experience in a situation like this,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of recognition and realizations that happen pretty early on in the process of how much people have been masking. It can actually be
Okay.
a pretty emotional
Mm.
situation for a lot of people. So we kind of tiptoe up to it.
Okay.
We kind of set some culture around being an anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-ableist, all neurodivergent affirming space.
Okay.
And then we'll do some warm-up games that are really easy. It's just about letting your brain bubble up with ideas. It's not character work right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we'll do a lot of short form improv. So really brief games, things like a storytelling game where each person might have a different letter of the alphabet that they have to begin their sentences with. And you're building on the last person's story, and every story is unique. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's hundreds of these games that we might play that are these short form games that are endlessly hilarious because as
Mm-hmm.
people get relaxed and feel safe, the spontaneity begins.
Right.
Because it's improv is not about trying to be funny. It's quite the opposite of that. It's about trying to be real and
Mm-hmm.
allowing the next thing to fall out of your mouth because that's what's funny. That's
Mm-hmm.
when it's funny. You've been in these rooms with people when they kind of surprise themselves by something they said and everyone laughs because it's just so real.
Right.
Um, that's what happens again and again is this
Okay.
authenticity. I don't do this out of a pursuit of performance.
Mm-hmm.
This is about play.
Right.
And the necessary precursor to play is safety and
Mm-hmm.
trust. You don't get
Yep.
to play with someone unless you're safe and you trust each other.
Right.
Uh, and then play is available. And through
Mm-hmm.
play, we get to discover ourselves, discover our imaginations and emotions and intellects in new ways.
Right.
Um, if I could back up for a minute, Becky, and just talk about giftedness, it's so often housed in the domain of education and looked at as intellect, analytical
Mm-hmm.
skills, problem solving, vocabulary, etc. But the same brain that does math and science and English and all that cool stuff is the brain that does emotions and imagination and sensuality and physicality and existential sensibility. Um, and the so many gifted people have intensities in these other dimensions as well. Or they may not be, their primary intensities may not be intellectual. They may be emotional,
Mm-hmm.
where their emotional lives are just highly sensitive and highly complex
Yeah.
and scaffolded. Their imaginations may be so rich and deep. This is many people who are later diagnosed with inattentive ADHD have these
Mm-hmm.
very rich imaginal lives
Yeah.
that compared to a boring lecture in civics in seventh grade is much more interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and so these improvisational settings allow people to explore these other dimensions of giftedness that
Okay.
haven't ever really been named or noticed
Mm-hmm.
outside of some pejorative.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah.
Um, and that allowing and exploration really brings all these parts of people out that have been forgotten or buried or just never allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so many thoughts. I often think about, like the author of the Hunger Games or,
Mm.
people who write these imaginative movies. And you're like, how did they even start with that? I think there is even a movie, the Divergent series. And now we're
Mhm.
saying that word so much with the brain, but yeah, they have to be in another place. And then I have four of my own kids, and one I would say is neurodivergent. And it's amazing. We just walk from place to place, but she moves in a different way all the time. Like the
Mm.
other day, she's carrying her book on her back and crawling. And I'm like, we just want to go home. But it's like for her, it's some other different way of looking at any way you can do things. It's fascinating. And then I just try to be a little more patient and understand she sees it in a more fun way than the average person does. So,
Yeah,
um,
the task of getting home is
right.
simply the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is very exciting. I did one of when you talked on the website about the improv, and there's like a testimony of a family that had gone through a very
Yeah,
traumatizing time. I think someone had been very sick, and then they were coming out of that. Is
right.
that one of your most, successful scenarios? Do you want to talk
Yeah,
about
and
that a little bit?
it was so meaningful for the family. Yeah, this was a family where a daughter who had just entered adolescence was diagnosed with cancer and spent the better part of a year in hospital in treatment,
Mm-hmm.
and nearly died several times. It was very close.
Wow.
It wasn't clear she was going to make it, and then she
Mm-hmm.
did. And then
Yeah.
she came home. And then she's 13, and the whole family has been traumatized through a year of hospital living and near death. Her
Yeah.
young sister had been largely neglected by necessity. Um,
Yeah.
and the whole family, the mom, what she said to me was, "We forgot how to have fun together.
Wow.
We've just been living in crisis."
Mm-hmm.
And so over the course of 4 sessions, they projected me onto their living room wall, and they were all in their living room. And
Mm.
we did 4 successive weeks of play, just pure play.
Wow.
And over the course of that, they were able to not be in their old roles, but to be in these imaginary roles and to play with those roles. And I would give them games to play with each other between sessions that they could do
Okay.
in the car or at the dinner table. Um,
Right.
and they started practicing playing.
Wow.
And 4 weeks later, just reported a sense of fresh start, new beginning. We get to now let that be past.
Right.
I recently had another family come to me because mom's ADHD, dad's autistic,
Mm.
youngest is super ADHD, and like 8, and just like, I mean, lit up. Then the middle child, like hyper middle childing it and like always like peacemaking. The
Yeah.
adolescent daughter, like she was basically a walking eye roll. And they were in conflict all the time.
Yeah.
And they came to practice the second improv tenet, which is got your back, which is we are all going to support each other. And there are no mistakes. You can't get it wrong. We're going to make this scene not only work, but be awesome every time.
Hmm.
And they got to practice that.
Okay.
And over the course of the time, I watched their relationships go from being 5 individuals to being this ensemble, this actual
Wow.
working together family. Um,
That's awesome.
it was awesome. It was so fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be clear, what we're doing is playing
Yeah.
and letting that be enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about an achievement. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
whether we succeed or fail. That those paradigms are unhelpful in play.
Yeah. Well, there's so much I'd say play therapy in younger years. To me, this makes me think of in, tween, teen, adults, where often play is, oh, really, are we doing that? Or it has to
Yes.
cost so much money to play, um, in just kind of a different form. So those are really cool stories, and thank you
Thanks,
for
but
sharing those.
thanks for letting me tell them. It is really fun, and uh, I came into it as I told you for the reasons that I explained, and I recognize that so much of what we're trying to do in counseling and therapy can also be approached from this other medium.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who have been in a bunch of therapy to work on perfectionism or social anxiety or whatever it is, come into improv and
Mm-hmm.
find a new way of coming at those things.
Mm-hmm.
The term social anxiety is misleading when it comes to gifted people because the anxiety is well founded. It's a reasonable fear of rejection because it's been repeated thousands of times. They've been had these micro rejections again and again and again and again and again. So the anxiety is real. The
Yeah.
longing for connection is true. The number of times they've been called weird or too much or odd or look how quirky you are.
Yeah.
That's just Esmeralda. Don't pay her any mind. Like, uh,
Right.
um, that oftentimes they'll find that this felt sense experience of safety and play gets them there in a way that therapy never has.
Yeah. Well, and of course, so many people need therapy. You have to often work individually on what's going on with you. But what I really like about this too is that a lot of times people have to realize that helping others, which maybe wasn't their intention, but seeing outside of themselves is so helpful
Yeah.
in that group mentality of, and not achieving, but just thinking of others in the group and how are we all going to be successful together, in just having a good time. What a great message. So, um, yeah, so I did want to just, kind of on the business, more technical, not as fun side, but important for our listeners. So
Sure.
you have coaching, counseling, and then you do the improv. How does your schedule look? Does it change by the month? Do you allot certain days for which type of work you're working on that day? How does it look schedule wise?
Well, it looks like a gifted person's counseling schedule because most gifted people are what they call multi-potentialites. So there's like lots of ways that you want to be able to exercise your consciousness.
Okay,
And
say that word
so
again, multi, whatever.
potentialite, multi-potentialite,
All right,
where
that's a
there's
new
lots of
one.
options as far as areas in which one could excel. And the pain of choosing can be a lot. So we end up doing a lot of different things. If someone had told me I was going to be in the same profession for 23 years, I would have laughed them out of the room. But I can do it because every person who walks through the virtual door is different, and every situation is different. And then I get to add on these improv classes. I've currently got it set up so my gifted adult and twice exceptional teen groups are fill to go, which means when they fill up, I'll schedule them.
Oh,
And
I saw that. Gets to
yeah,
10.
with Improv for Therapists, I do that one in person here in Asheville, North Carolina. And when I hear rumblings of interest, I'll schedule one and we'll do it. And with the families, it's just when people reach out. So I max out at 20 clients a week, in a Monday to Thursday schedule. And so when it's time to run an improv class, I'll often do that on Sunday afternoons because it's when people can come. And so then my work week is Sunday to Thursday for a period of 6 weeks while I'm playing on Sundays. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, generally I'm like 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'll see 4 to 6 a day, depending on how it shakes out. Um, I schedule 4 to 6 weeks of vacation time for myself every year, just to be able to keep my feet on the ground, and recognize that what we do for a living is only one dimension of our lives, and that there's a lot of life to live outside of work.
Yes, absolutely. No, I love the breakdown of that schedule and how as a family or a group of kids, Sunday afternoon is a great time. And you're like, well, then I'll have Friday, Saturday, because I'm going to be helping Sunday, but you're probably having a good time, I think, while you're doing it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I can tell that you absolutely love it. So,
Yeah,
um,
I tell people that that I have to pinch myself sometimes because, like, to be clear, Becky, I'm making a living by cutting up with the smartest people in the world and helping them at the same time. Like
yeah,
that's my actual life.
right.
Yeah.
But it took several years to get there, right? At
Yeah.
least, at least
What,
say that. Don't make it look that easy.
and the reason I say it in that way is
Mhm.
because it feels so aligned. Like I'm doing the work where I feel best and most competent and most lit up.
Mhm.
And so it does feel like a gift and a joy. I'm not punching anyone.
Right.
Um, I am living a life that feels like one of integrity and alignment. And
Hmm.
so it is fun.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I love the beginning of the story and I really love the planners, calendars. I'm always hesitant to get rid of mine and I kind of have this area of my cabinet at school with multiple and I'm like, why am I holding on to this? It's usually because I think I need to remember someone's name or whatever, but who knows what it will mean in the future. So,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Well, yeah, pull them out. Go ahead and have yourself a retrospective.
Yeah.
Really fun exercise to make a list of those names of people that you felt the deepest connection with and the best therapeutic impact with.
I think my mom saves our calendars too. She still has very much the old calendar and all the little fun activities. And I think she loves to look back. So,
That's
yeah, I'm
great.
glad
That's
that came
great.
out today.
Yeah.
Anything else that you feel like people looking into this world you'd want them to know, or anything else you wanted to
Yeah,
share?
that uh gifted people are often identified in school, as we talked about, and then you become an adult and it's never mentioned again. But that intensity and complexity and curiosity and conscientiousness, it remains with you, and that through finding some kind of support, counseling, coaching, groups, however it is, you can really kind of step into more of yourself and become unmasked more and more as you have more and more agency and autonomy in your own life. And there is a lot of juiciness there. There's a lot of letting go. So it ain't easy, but the payoff is worth it. So I will invite everyone to come over to the resources page at my website, giftedandgrowing.org. There's a list of all kinds of other websites there as well that are about giftedness, gifted adults, parenting, kids, neurodivergence writ large, podcasts, articles, books. So there's a lot of ways for you to dive into this rabbit hole and do some exploration and figure out what's going to be most helpful. A lot of the folks who come to see me have done some cursory reading and are having a series of epiphanies and really looking for someone to work through all of these awakenings with.
Right.
Yeah, check out the resources page, get some support. We are a tiny little group of people, percentage-wise,
Yeah.
of the population, and alone it can be pretty miserable, and together it can be quite joyous.
Yeah. No, I mean, with such a small percentage, I mean, it has to be so helpful to people when they finally found you. Have you found even any other therapists or counselors who are doing this exact work as you, or no?
There's a few, and it's
Okay.
growing.
Okay.
We now have a Facebook group of therapists and coaches for gifted and twice exceptional people. And there's about 70 of us listed on there. But my
Okay.
work, um, I have people contacting me from all over the world. There
Mm,
are so few of us.
yeah.
Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love your story and the work. I love the improv and how you're using that and how it brings you a lot of joy as well. So thank you so much for your time today and just for all of your insights and the excitement, I would say, that you're bringing to the field. So we appreciate you being here today.
All right, Becky, thanks for your work too.
Thank you. To our listeners, we're so happy you're tuning in to Mastering Counseling. We hope you continue to ask questions and leave us comments about this field. Please check out the Gifted and Growing website, especially if this part of the population and thinking is really appealing to you for you to know more about. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. To signing off of Mastering Counseling.